The crash landing. The evening air on Jordan 5 hung heavy with moisture from the recent storm. Arland Ray adjusted his worn hat and stepped out onto his porch, surveying the vast farmland that stretched before him. At 62, he'd grown accustomed to the solitude of this remote world, where the twin suns painted everything in shades of amber and gold. His daily routine never varied much. Feed the livestock, check the irrigation systems, tend to the stubborn cinderloaf crops that somehow thrived in this harsh soil. It was a simple life, but it was his. That evening, as he carried a bucket of grain toward the southern pasture, something caught his eye. A shimmer in the distance, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. But this was different, it moved with purpose, descending rapidly toward his land. "What in the?" Arland muttered, setting down his bucket. The shimmer became a streak of silver light, then a roar that shook the ground beneath his feet. Whatever it was crashed beyond the ridge, sending a plume of smoke and debris into the darkening sky. Arland's first instinct was to contact the authorities. Jordan 5 was a backwater planet, but they had protocols for this sort of thing. His hand moved toward his comm device, then stopped. Something told him to investigate first. The walk to the crash site took 20 minutes across uneven terrain. When he crested the hill, Arland stopped dead in his tracks. In the center of a perfectly circular crater lay a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was massive, easily the size of his transport shuttle, with sleek, serpentine features and scales that caught the last light of the setting suns. A dragon, though nothing like the mythical beasts from Earth's ancient stories. This one was real, breathing, and clearly in distress. The creature's enormous golden eyes met his, and Arland saw something unexpected there. Not aggression or threat, but a desperate plea for help. "Well," he whispered to himself, "this is new." The dragon's sides heaved with labored breathing. Arland could see injuries along her flanks, nothing life-threatening but clearly painful. More concerning was her obvious exhaustion and the unmistakable signs that she was carrying young. For a moment, man and dragon simply stared at each other across the smoking crater. Then Arland made a decision that would change everything. He turned and walked back toward his farm, returning an hour later with water and a selection of the freshest produce from his stores. He'd dealt with frightened animals before, though never quite like this. "Easy now," he said softly, placing the offerings at the crater's edge. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dragon watched him with those intelligent golden eyes. Slowly, carefully, she stretched her long neck forward and sniffed at the food. Then, with delicate precision that surprised Arland, she began to eat. That was the beginning of everything. Building trust. 3 days had passed since the crash, and Arland had fallen into a new routine. Each morning, he would tend to his regular farm duties, then make his way to the crater where the dragon had made her temporary home. She hadn't moved much, which worried him. Her condition seemed stable, but he could tell she was growing more uncomfortable as her pregnancy progressed. The crater provided shelter, but it wasn't suitable for the long term. "We need to get you somewhere better," Arland said during his morning visit, setting down a fresh supply of water and grain. The dragon, he'd started thinking of her as Sarah, though he wasn't sure why, lifted her great head and regarded him with those impossibly expressive eyes. Over the past few days, he'd begun to notice patterns in her behavior. The way her breathing changed when she was content. How her scales seemed to shimmer differently when she was alert or worried. This morning, she seemed restless. Arland had spent the previous evening researching everything he could find about dragon-like species in the galactic databases. Most of it was theoretical, encounters with such creatures were rare and poorly documented. But he'd learned enough to know that Sarah's species was likely highly intelligent and strongly bonded to their young. "I've been thinking," he continued, settling down on a nearby rock. "There's an old equipment shed on the north side of the property. It's weatherproof, spacious, and far enough from the main road that you won't be disturbed." Sarah's tail flicked once, a gesture he'd learned meant she was listening. "The question is, are you ready to move?" As if in response, Sarah slowly rose to her feet. It was the first time Arland had seen her fully upright, and the sight took his breath away. She was magnificent, easily 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with wings that, when partially extended, cast shadows across the entire crater. But it was her grace that struck him most. Despite her size and obvious discomfort, every movement was fluid and purposeful. The journey to the shed took the better part of the morning. Sarah moved slowly but steadily, pausing frequently to rest. Arland walked beside her, ready to offer support if needed, though he suspected she was far stronger than her current condition suggested. The old equipment shed had been built to house large farming machinery. Arland had cleared it out years ago but never found another use for it. Now, as he opened the wide doors and watched Sarah carefully examine the space, he realized it was perfect. The building was temperature-controlled, well-ventilated, and spacious enough for Sarah to move around comfortably. More importantly, it offered privacy and security. "What do you think?" Arland asked. Sarah entered the building and walked its perimeter, her claws clicking softly on the concrete floor. Then she settled into the far corner, arranging herself in a position that looked surprisingly comfortable. For the first time since her arrival, she made a sound, a low, rumbling purr that seemed to express satisfaction. Arland smiled. "I'll take that as approval." Over the next few days, he worked to make the space more suitable for his unusual guest. He brought in soft bedding materials, installed additional lighting, and set up a water system that would provide a constant supply of fresh, clean water. But it was the small gesture that meant the most. On the fourth evening, as Arland was preparing to leave for the night, Sarah lifted something from beneath her wing, a smooth, oval stone that glowed with a soft, internal light. She placed it carefully at his feet, then looked up at him expectantly. "For me?" Arland asked, picking up the stone. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse gently in his palm. Sarah's purr deepened, and for the first time since her arrival, Arland saw something like contentment in her golden eyes. He understood then that he wasn't just caring for a crashed alien, he was forming a friendship with an intelligent being who had chosen to trust him with something precious. The mysterious ship. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah's arrival, and Arland had grown accustomed to sharing his farm with an alien dragon. She was due to give birth soon. He could see the signs in her restless movements and the way she begun arranging the bedding materials into a more nest-like configuration. That morning started like any other, until the stone Sarah had given him began to glow brighter than usual. Arland was in the middle of his breakfast when the pulsing light caught his attention. "That's new," he muttered, picking up the stone from where it sat on his kitchen table. The moment his fingers touched its surface, images flashed through his mind, not his own memories, but something else. He saw vast star fields, ships moving through space, and creatures like Sarah soaring between worlds. The visions lasted only seconds, but they left him with an unmistakable impression: danger was coming. Arland hurried to the shed, where he found Sarah already on her feet, her great head turned toward the sky. Her scales rippled with agitation, and a low growl rumbled in her throat. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked. Sarah's response was to extend her wings partially, not in preparation for flight, but as a defensive posture. She was protecting something, and Arland realized with a chill that she was protecting him. The attack came without warning. A sleek, black ship dropped out of hyperspace directly above the farm, its weapons already charging. It was smaller than a military vessel but clearly designed for combat. Arland had seen ships like it in news reports: bounty hunters, mercenaries, the kind of people who made their living tracking down things that others wanted captured. The ship's scanners swept across the property, and Arland knew they'd found what they were looking for. "They're after you," he said to Sarah, understanding flooding through him. "You're not just lost, you're running from something." Sarah's growl deepened, and she moved to place herself between Arland and the ship hovering above them. The gesture was clear: she would fight to protect him, even in her condition. The ship's communication system crackled to life, and a harsh voice filled the air. "Terrestrial being, you are harboring a fugitive of the hegemony. Surrender the creature immediately, and you will not be harmed." Arland looked at Sarah, seeing the fear in her golden eyes, not for herself, but for the young she carried. He thought about the trust she'd shown him, the friendship they'd built, and the stone that now pulsed frantically in his pocket. Like hell, he muttered. He activated his farm's emergency beacon, a signal that would alert Jordan 5's defense forces, though he knew they were too far away to arrive in time. Then he turned to Sarah. "Can you fly?" he asked. Sarah shook her great head, her condition making flight impossible. "Then we make our stand here." The ship descended, landing in the field beyond the shed. Armed figures emerged, humanoid but clearly not human, with angular features and weapons that hummed with exotic energy. "This is your final warning," their leader called out. "The female is property of the hegemony. She and her offspring will be returned for processing." Processing. The word sent a chill down Arland's spine. He'd heard whispers about the hegemony, a vast empire that treated intelligent species like resources to be harvested and exploited. "Over my dead body," Arland called back, surprising himself with his own courage. The lead hunter raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Sarah acted. Her roar shook the ground and shattered windows across the farm. It was a sound of pure defiance, a declaration that she would never surrender. The stone in Arland's pocket blazed with light, and he felt a surge of energy pass between him and the dragon. Suddenly, he could feel what she felt, see what she saw. They were connected, bonded in a way that transcended species. And in that moment, Arland realized that this was bigger than just one dragon and one farmer. This was about freedom, about the right of intelligent beings to live their own lives. The battle was about to begin. Battle for survival. The first energy blast scorched the ground inches from Arland's feet. He dove for cover behind an old farming implement as more shots rang out, their alien weapons painting the morning air with streaks of violent light. Sarah responded with a fury that took even Arland's breath away. Despite her pregnancy, she moved with devastating speed, her tail whipping around to knock two of the hunters off their feet. Her claws, which had been so gentle when taking food from his hands, now tore through their advanced armor like paper. But there were too many of them, and more ships were appearing in the sky. "The female is weakened," the lead hunter shouted to his team. "Concentrate fire. Bring her down." Arland felt Sarah's pain through their strange connection as an energy blast found its mark, burning across her shoulder. Her roar of anguish sparked something primal in him, a rage he'd never experienced before. He emerged from cover, grabbing the first weapon he could find, an old plasma cutter used for clearing vegetation. It wasn't designed for combat, but desperation made him creative. The modified tool sent a concentrated beam of energy into the nearest hunter's weapon, causing it to explode in the alien's hands. "Stay down, human." Sarah's voice echoed in his mind, not words, exactly, but unmistakable meaning transmitted through their bond. "Protect the eggs." Eggs. Plural. Arland realized with a start that Sarah wasn't just pregnant, she was about to give birth to multiple offspring. The knowledge hit him just as another wave of hunters advanced from the landed ships. But their assault was interrupted by something unexpected. The stone in Arland's pocket suddenly erupted with brilliant light, projecting a holographic message into the air above them. The message was in a language Arland didn't understand, but its meaning was clear to everyone present. It was a distress call, transmitted on frequencies that reached far beyond Jordan 5's atmosphere. And someone had answered. The sky above the farm tore open as ships emerged from hyperspace, dozens of them, sleek and graceful like Sarah herself. Dragon ships, Arland realized, piloted by Sarah's own people. The lead hunter's confidence evaporated as he looked up at the growing fleet. "Retreat," he ordered his team, but it was too late. The dragon ships didn't attack with crude energy weapons. Instead, they sang, a harmonic frequency that resonated through the air and into the very bones of everyone on the ground. The hunters' weapons simply stopped working, their ship systems shutting down one by one. As the last hunter ship fell silent, the largest of the dragon vessels landed gracefully in Arland's field. Its hull seemed to be grown rather than built, all flowing curves and organic patterns. A figure emerged from the ship, humanoid but clearly related to Sarah's species. Tall and elegant, with scales that shifted color in the sunlight and eyes that held the same deep intelligence Arland had come to know in Sarah. The newcomer approached slowly, hands empty and posture non-threatening. When he spoke, it was in accented but clear standard. "I am Captain Thane of the Dracorian Council," he said, looking between Arland and Sarah. "We received a distress beacon from this location." Sarah rumbled something in her own language, and Thane's expression changed to one of amazement. "She says you saved her life," Thane continued, now addressing Arland directly. "That you offered sanctuary when she was at her most vulnerable." "Anyone would have done the same," Arland replied, though he knew that wasn't true. "No," Thane said solemnly. "Very few would. The hegemony has spent decades hunting my people, capturing our young for their genetic experiments. Sarah was escaping from one of their breeding facilities when her ship was damaged." Arland felt sick at the implication. They were going to use her eggs. Or worse. But now. Thane gestured to the disabled hunter ships scattered across the field. "Now they will face the consequences of their actions." As if summoned by his words, Sarah suddenly went rigid. Her eyes widened, and she began making urgent sounds. "The young," Thane said urgently. "They come now." What followed was the most extraordinary hour of Arland's life. With Thane's help, he assisted in the birth of 3 dragon hatchlings, beings that emerged from crystalline eggs already aware and alert, their tiny scales shimmering with the same intelligence as their mother. As the sun set over Jordan 5, Arland sat beside Sarah and her newborns, watching as the Dracorian fleet prepared for departure. The hunters had been taken into custody, their ships confiscated. But the real victory was smaller and more personal: 3 new lives brought safely into the universe, and a friendship that had changed everything. The universe changed forever. 6 months had passed since that day, and Arland's farm had become something entirely different from what it once was. The old equipment shed had been expanded into a proper facility, with the help of Dracorian engineers who seemed to work as much by instinct as by design. Sarah's 3 offspring, whom Arland had named Hope, Dawn, and Sky, were growing rapidly, already the size of large horses and displaying intelligence that amazed everyone who met them. But the changes went far beyond his property. Captain Thane had been true to his word about consequences for the hegemony. The dragon ships that had responded to Sarah's distress call were only the beginning. Word had spread throughout the galaxy about the human farmer who had sheltered a pregnant dragon, and the response had been overwhelming. Species that had been oppressed by the hegemony for centuries began to rally together. The Dracorian Council became the focal point for a new alliance, one dedicated to protecting the rights of all intelligent beings. And Arland found himself at the center of it all. "It's ironic," he said to Sarah one evening as they watched the hatchlings play in the fields. She was fully recovered now, her scales gleaming with health and contentment. "I spent 30 years in solitude, and now I can barely find a quiet moment." Sarah's response was a warm rumble that he'd learned was her equivalent of laughter. Their bond had only grown stronger over time, allowing them to communicate in ways that went beyond words. Through that connection, he felt her response: "You were never truly alone. You were simply waiting for the right family to find you." The hatchlings had indeed become like family to him. Hope was the boldest, already attempting short flights despite her mother's worried supervision. Dawn was the most curious, constantly investigating every corner of the farm with scientific precision. Sky was the gentlest, often curling up next to Arland during his evening walks. "The council wants to establish a permanent embassy here," Thane had told him during his last visit. "Jordan 5 has become a symbol of what's possible when different species work together." Arland had agreed, though he'd insisted on keeping the farming operation going. "Someone's got to feed all these diplomats," he'd joked. But tonight was special. Tonight, Sarah was going to share something with him that she'd been preparing for months. As the twin sun set, painting the sky in familiar shades of amber and gold, Sarah led him to a hill overlooking the farm. Her hatchlings followed, sensing the importance of the moment. There, carved into the stone, was a story, told in the flowing script of the Dracorian language, but somehow Arland could understand every word. It was the tale of a farmer and a dragon, of trust given when it was needed most, of courage found in the quietest places. But more than that, it was a promise. A promise that the universe remembered acts of kindness, no matter how small they seemed at the time. A promise that hope could be found in the most unexpected places. A promise that family wasn't about blood or species, but about the bonds forged through shared hardship and mutual respect. As Arland read the carved words, he felt tears on his weathered cheeks. He had set out to save one life and had somehow helped change the fate of countless others. "Thank you," he whispered to Sarah, not sure if he was thanking her for the story or for everything that had followed. Her response came not in words but in a sensation, warmth, gratitude, and something deeper. The knowledge that their friendship had rippled out across the stars, inspiring others to choose compassion over fear, understanding over hatred. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but it was also full of possibilities. And sometimes, all it took to change everything was one person willing to help a stranger in need. As they walked back toward the farm, with 3 young dragons playing in the fields around them and ships from a dozen worlds coming and going from the new spaceport, Arland smiled. He had found his family at last. The end.